Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's community meeting, September community meeting. Let's get started. In the agenda, as usual, we're going to have some introductions, talk about what the team has been working on, what has been shipped. We have, I think, 2 demos this month, and then we're going to discuss current and future work, some community news, and then some Q&A at the end. But if you do have any questions at any point, just feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll make sure to read them out or answer you if I know the answer. This is the OpenFGA team all over the world, lots of flags, as Andres was saying. So welcome, Sad. I just saw your name added there. Cool. So introductions. I haven't checked the list of people in the call, but if there's anyone new that would like to introduce himself, and I can start, as usual for the last couple of meetings, I think. My name is Carla. I am based in Valencia, Spain. I work for Okta. I'm interested in OpenFGA because one, I work with very similar products. And where am I in my adoption journey? I am currently working a lot with the SDK generator, which if you haven't touched yet, I recommend that you take a look. So yeah, just doing some things in the SDK generator if you wanna go check the latest PRs. I don't have any questions for you other than, is there anyone else that would like to introduce himself? All right, tough crowd. So we're gonna continue. You can also drop your name or anything in the chat as well if you don't feel like chatting. Okay, so things that just shipped. Maybe who wants to talk about this? Andres, maybe you want to share more about this part?
Perfect, I can. So not a lot, mostly fixes in the last few weeks. We do have a lot of things that we would have wanted to ship before the meeting, so we could share them here, but they are pretty close, and some of them we are going to be demoing today in the meeting. So hold a little more, and in the next release we'll have some goodies that I think you'll like.
Nice, thank you very much. Okay, I think we can get started with demos. And the first one is improvements in the right API by Sylvanus. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And if not,
Yeah, pretty good.
okay.
It's Vilnius in Lithuanian, so but it's hard to pronounce for Americans, so I usually go by Z here. Vilnius is good.
Okay. Thank
you. So we made some improvements for the right API, which is if you can go to the next slide, which was a long requested feature by the community and by a lot of our users is idempotent rights. It's not fully idempotent rights. So let's talk about why we need to do this. So during a normal or let's say regular import of large data sets, sometimes sometimes a request would fail due to network issues or due to whatever other issues, and then you would just want to retry the request, and that request, if it succeeded on our side, but it was a network issue, then the subsequent request would fail with something like error 400 saying that a tuple already exists. And this was a big problem for a lot of for mostly import, but also day-to-day work. Like if you don't know if a tuple exists, you would have to read it, delete it first, and then insert. So we came up with this idea to allow users to send duplicate tuples and have a no-op or have a parameter to take action on it or what to do. So like we introduced 2 new parameters. One is on duplicate, and one is so on duplicate for writes, and then on missing for deletes. And then you can choose to ignore, or you can choose to leave error, which is the default behavior if the parameter is not specified. So what this does is basically allows the user to just take no action if there's an existing duplicate identical tuple in the database on write, or if we try to delete a tuple that does not exist, then we can just ignore and do no op. I think we can go to the next slide. One thing to note that this is the operation is atomic. That if you can specify two parameters, one for unduplicate, one for on write, or one for write, one for delete. But if at least one of those is error and there's an actual error, then the pull request would fail. So it's still atomic. And one thing also to add is that tuples are considered not identical if they have different conditions. So if we have a sample model here, right, then we can have tuple without condition, and then the next tuple comes in with a condition. We don't consider that as duplicate. We will still error in those cases. And if there's a change in the condition, we will also error. But if you send another tuple with exactly the same condition as was before, then we'll ignore it. And that means, and ignore means no op, means we don't insert, we don't update, we don't write anything to the changelog. So we needed the changelog to be absolutely correct in those cases. So we don't, if there's no change in the database, there's no change with the changelog. So a couple of notes. So this will be released in 1.10. It's merged in master. If anybody wants to take, the current version using the commit number, you can pull it in. CLI and SDK changes still pending. So no change in log, changes on no op. I mentioned that. And deduplication in one request is still no change. If you send two tuples in one request, it will still fail. So that's there's no change in that. And if I can share my screen, I have a little bit of a demo on this. So let me start my local OpenFGA instance, and this is running on Postgres and Docker. And I have a little bit with the vibe coding, wrote some script to show how this works. Okay, so we're connected to my local OpenFGA. We're going to be using some sample tuples, creating a store, creating a model, the same model that was in the slides. So step one, so we're just creating tuples, inserting 3 tuples. You see document file 1, file 2, file 3. We see changes in the changelog, 3 tuples written. Now, if we just try to repeat the same thing, no parameter, no change, then this should fail as it fails right now, right? So we're getting the same error. It says cannot add a tuple which already exists. So there's no change in the current behavior if you don't specify any new parameters. Now, the next thing we're going to add unduplicate ignore. And so we're expecting this request to succeed, right? So we added this unduplicate ignore. We're sending exactly the same 3 tuples. So request was successful, but we have no changes in the changelog. So basically it was a no op. Now, if we delete tuples that don't exist without the parameter, it should error like it does right now. There's no change in that behavior. We're still getting. We try to delete tuple document file 4. That does not exist, so we're getting an error. Now, if we add the parameter, I'm missing ignore. Right. So now this will succeed, and now we see that only document 3 was deleted. We have that in the changelog. There was a no op for document 4. And the same thing, we can do in a single request, we can do both writes and deletes and specify both parameters, right? And then we'll see the change in the changelog. There's another sample with the condition. So we insert a tuple with condition for file 5. Grant duration 1 hour. we see that in the change log. Now we try to write the same tuple with a different condition. File 5, run duration 2 hours. Even with the unduplicate ignore, this still fails because it's a different condition, so we treat it as a different tuple. Okay, and then so another example of writing a tuple with condition when the same tuple without condition exists. So we had tuple 1 or relationship for a document for file 1 without a condition, and now we're gonna try to write one with a condition. Even with ignore, this is still gonna fail because it's a different tuple in a sense, right? And now the last example I have here is if the condition is identical, right? And so for file 5, we had this grand duration for 1 hour. All the times everything's identical, then we succeed. And in this case, we show no changes. Any questions? Welcome.
Hey y'all, this is Sam. Thank you for showing that. Me and Andrew were just chatting how we're excited to not have to do error checks on our tuples with this stuff. I'm kind of curious. I imagine it was intentional to not allow idempotent writes early on in OpenFGA. Is there like a change of kind of opinion on why that's what people want now?
So there a lot of feedback we get from the community users as well as other folks is that it becomes problematic, especially when they try to import tuples. Like imagine you have many tuples to import, and of course sometimes things happen. It stop in the middle, so it becomes very problematic and difficult user experience if you want to import, like, and you stop in the middle, then you have to basically every time you hit in because you expect the tuples to be duplicate, and then you have to basically figure out what is imported, what is not, and then do the delta of it. So that's why we allow it like to be a flag that you can opt in and opt out. So depending on the stage of where you are and what are the tuples like, what are you expecting, right? Because like if you're actually in the operation phase and you don't expect a lot of conflict, then you might want to keep track when there's conflict, right? But when you're still importing many tuples, especially in migrations, like you would expect deltas in those, like duplicate those cases, and then just like don't have to do a lot.
Nice.
Track.
That makes a lot of sense. We've done some migrations and imports on our end and had to do a lot of logging and error catching on those. So that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, we've been hearing that request for a long time, right? And we could have done it earlier, right? The main reason we couldn't do it, and it's not great to share, but that's the truth, is that we also have another adapter that we're using, a storage adapter for DynamoDB that we were going to open source. We didn't open source at the end for, and in DynamoDB is not as trivial to do idempotent writes, in particular in a active multi-region deployment, because you have conflicts between like people writing the same thing at the same time, and how you handle those scenarios wasn't obvious for us how to deal with that problem in a consistent way. And lately we found a reasonable trade-off of how to also handle it there. And then we say, okay, yeah, if we can, if that's okay for us in the implementation works well, of course we can have it everywhere. We couldn't change it just for some adapters because that implies an API change that we couldn't support everywhere. So we had to find a solution that worked everywhere. And now we found one and we built it.
I'll add to that a bit because part of it is this is kind of risky in terms of in certain situations. Especially at high load, if you try the same request at the same time, even with things like Postgres, one of them may, like, you might be trying to add and delete, and one of them deletes and tells you, hey, everything's gone. but it's not because it happened to go in before the other one. So in some situation, this is risky, and this is why right now it's opt-in rather than the default, because you're taking on that risk. You're saying, all right, yes, I understand this might happen. It's not a big deal for me, and I want to proceed. Basically, this is also a major factor of why we were kind of avoiding this. Like, we did not want to put people in this situation, unless it's opt-in, and now we're going with it as an opt-in.
And I'll add one last comment. The documentation will kind of clearly lay this out, but we're trying to avoid the word idempotent because it's kind of really not what we're doing. What we're really doing is just ignoring duplicates. And so that's kind of that trade-off, is we still wanted to not mess with the transactionalism that kind of Ragged was getting at, but still provide a better experience when you're trying to write a lot of tuples. And so we're kind of taking that approach.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it.
Good. So this is already merged in OpenFGA. So what Z was showing is like the merged version of the product. He was building it locally because it's not released yet, but the plan is to release it pretty soon. We also need support in SDKs for this to be useful, because I assume most of you are using SDKs. So, and we are going to start adding those parameters in the right API everywhere, so you can take advantage of that. I think the release for the OpenFGA itself is going to be relatively soon. I don't know if we already have a timeline for SDKs, Tyler or Daniel, but I know as soon as we can, but I don't know when yet.
Yeah, as soon as we can. Tyler and I need to talk, and then yeah, but this is obviously one of the more important, higher priorities, so we're going to discuss it.
I think in general, we're going to try to do one or two and then try to lean on the community to try to do the other ones, because there might be other SDKs that somebody would want quicker than what we can get to it. And so we can try to maybe provide a template and then allow the community also help out. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll definitely prioritize the language for sure.
Sounds good. Okay, my turn. And so I wanted to demo something that is also not merged yet, and it's more an experiment right now. And I want your feedback. Which is, so in the last session, in this meeting, I don't know if you were here or not, but when showing how list objects work and which path, how we had to optimize certain scenarios, we show certain diagrams of OpenFGA models that explore like the relations and the complexity of each path. And there was some people asking, hey, we should be able to, it would be great if we can get that. Now there's a repository that is called, I think, Visualizer or something like that. I don't remember the name. Someone can probably get it and link it in the chat. That has a web app that lets you paste the model and creates a graph there, and that you can visualize. But I wanted to experiment if it was useful or not to include that in the CLI. And what I did is, now the CLI has a command called visualize that you can specify an FGA or an FGA YAML file, and it's going to generate by default an SVG, can also be a PNG that has a visualization of the model. And what I did is I ran that for every model that we have in the sample store repo to see how they looked. Okay? And we can see some of them. And let's see this. Let me see a model that is easier to understand. Maybe this one is pretty simple. So let me go to the expenses model. So it has employee and report. It tells you have a manager, can be an employee. You can manage if you're the manager, or can manage the manager. So this is a recursion. Okay, so potentially it can be super expensive to evaluate if there's a lot of managers, if the chain of managers is high, right? In the hierarchy is high. I don't know if you work in the U.S. government or a very large organization, maybe the management chain is very large. Like, I don't know if you end up reporting to Donald Trump today at some moment, right? So that may be the top of the chain, and how many levels do you have from to an employee to there? And anyway, so and then you have the expense report. We can have to be an approver. You can manage the submitter, which is again this can be a recursion, right? The approver from and the submitter. So the way this shows is that to evaluate, so if I want to evaluate manager of the manager of an employee, it's a direct relationship, right? And but if I want to know can manage, I need to do a union of of can manage with manager for employee, and that is an infinite weight. So this thing here, we call that infinite weight when there's a recursion, and we call it weight 1 when there's a direct relationship. So this, when we see this, and one of the reasons we started using this approach was to try to understand the models we get from the community and the customers, and understand the complexity and see how we can improve performance. Right? Was to see a model and see, okay, where are the hot spots that might be more challenging, and we need to see how we can improve, right? And but then, okay, more examples here. And this one has different levels of green based on the weight. So you have, say, weight 1, weight 2, weight 3, right? And the idea is that the higher the weight, it can be potentially more expensive to evaluate. But it's not the only variable that is relevant when you are understanding performance in FGA. It's also the data you have and how it's distributed. And of course, with the CLI and the model, we don't know that. Okay, we only know what can be done in the model. And if we go through all the models, a lot of them are mainly greenish, which is good. Some of them have some red, but there are some of them, for example, this one, what is it? This one, that is all red, right? And why is it all red? Because if I go to the model, which is this one, you have a role, and a role can have the assignee relationship is recursive. So you can assign all the assignees of a role to a role, and the group membership is also recursive. Okay, so you can have groups in groups. That implies that anytime you want to know if a user is an admin of an organization, you have potentially an infinite hierarchy there, or maybe 2 infinite hierarchies, one role assignee and another one with group member, right? And all of the relationships end up calling something that has role assignee, so all of the relationships end up being red. Okay? And the main concern we have to ship this feature is that people that have a model like this, we are going to look at this and they're going to say, okay, this is never going to work, right? Because the performance here, it is going to be so bad that maybe I need to try another product to solve this problem, right? And at the end of the day, if you have recursion in your checks, it's going to be the same, right? So you're going to keep finding data until you traverse all the recursion. And of course, the recursion, the impact in performance is depending on the depth of the recursion. If you don't have any nested group, then the performance is going to be better than if you have a nested group, right? And then if you have a very high depth of nesting in groups, it's going to be worse than if it's very shallow, right? So we are still in the fence of how to handle that, just to not to scare potential people who are trying to use FGA and see how it goes, right? And so that's one perspective. And the other one is there are things in this in the graph that might be useful besides the performance part, which is I want to understand how I want to visualize the model somehow, right? And the other question is if that would be useful for examine scenarios. We see that production models have very complex graphs, right? So all of these are examples, and in some cases they start to get complex, like I don't know, these ones. I imagine that if we take any of the models you have for your production scenarios, is going to be way bigger. Maybe, and from that perspective, maybe useless, because you cannot comprehend or navigate one of these graphs, right? So the question there would be, if you think this is useful. Second, how it could be more useful for the scenarios that you may have, right? Third, you think a visualization you would use it, and for what in general, right? Besides this specific solution. Now I'm gonna stop talking and see if anyone has any feedback or ideas.
Hi, this is Andrew. I think this could be really useful for like documentation when we update our model, like communicating the model with the team. One of the things that I'm curious about is like, could you use this visualization to visualize like the graph used for a specific check too? That's something that we do a lot when we're like optimizing database queries in our application, is like it's so dependent on the specific data, the shape of the data that's in the database, the table statistics and things like that. And so I wonder how that could fit in here as well.
So in general, if you think from the model perspective, right? If you want to understand how a relation is evaluated, it would be something like this, right? So in this case, in this model, which is one is advanced entitlements. So you have a feature plan organization. You want to know you have a feature, you go to the subscriber, you go to the organization. So it's pretty direct, the graph, right? But this is how it's resolved, right? And let me take another one, right? So this is how can manage is resolved, right? So it's gonna check, it's a union of can manage and employee manager. So this is kind of showing that. However, if you have a single relationship, you need to find it, right? And I need to kind of, you probably want to, we were discussing today, would it make sense to have a command here which says relation, right? And just shows a graph of that only includes that relation as in only information you need to know how to evaluate a specific relation, right? And that can be useful. I don't know if that would be something you would do in the CLI, which will help, or it's more for a UI, right? Where you want to just, okay, let me check this one, and have more interactions, right? Then and you can potentially explore things, right? So I think it might be better in a UI than a CLI. But again, it's something that is easier to do the CLI than the UI for obvious reasons. So it's something we can start playing with. Say, okay, if this is useful, because that's the thing, right? Are you going to use it? Mm-hmm. And if we believe this is useful, then it makes sense to invest on something more sophisticated. Mm-hmm. And something I could do is I could put this in a branch or in a fork, and we can help you build it. It's very easy. Just build, and it works. And you can try it with your models, and you can tell me, okay, we find it useful. We think it's fun, because the thing is this is fun, right? It's fun to do it. Now, are people gonna use it or not? That's it's gonna solve a real problem, or it's more just like the visualization we have in the playground today, right? It's fun, right? But it's pretty useless, right? So when people see it, they like it, right? Because it looks, they have a graph, but you have a large model, you cannot use it. So anyway, so I think like putting in a branch might be useful to get some feedback first before committing to ship it, and we can take it from there, right? See how much it helps. More comments, opinions? Okay, good. Thank you for that. I'm gonna take a look at that one also, Andrew. So okay, then I'm gonna stop sharing and we can go back to slides.
All right, thank you. Going back to the slides now, I hope. Cool. We're back to community news now, and pretty much where you can hear more about OpenFGA around the globe. So on October 13th and 14th, Sam would be at All Things Open. I think that's what's this? I have a Zoom thing in here, North Carolina. So if you're around and you wanna connect and go check out his talk, it would be a good one. Then in November we have Jose Padilla and Alice Gibbons, and they will be in KubeCon North America. So I think Jose was here, but he might have just left. But yeah, so if you're around as well, feel free to stop by. And we also have some new companies adopting OpenFGA. First, we have Headspace, and they're using OpenFGA to manage entitlements for its users based on their subscriptions. And then we have two other companies that I'm going to let Andres talk about.
So first, thank you for Jeremy, who's in the call, for adding Headspace to the list. Thank you very much. And then, so sometimes we have companies that for some reason they cannot add themselves to the adopters list, but they end up publishing articles saying, okay, how they are using OpenFGA, right? And so one there is a project called Neonifus that you can Google it and go to the homepage. And but they are doing kind of a cloud infrastructure, open source cloud infrastructure, uh, uh, being financed by European funds. So they basically want to be like an European cloud that is open source and that everyone in Europe could potentially use and deploy to anywhere. And they have a presentation there where they explain how they're using OpenFGA in that project. And then the other one is from a consulting company that helped a very large electrical company deploying FGA. They are not saying in the article which company it is, but the link says Schneider Electric, so we know it's Schneider Electric, and which we know they have been using OpenFGA for a while, but it's one of those large companies. For just getting approval to say we are using OpenFGA requires I don't know how many approvals, right? So they are not on the record, but now we have certain evidence that we can show that they are also using OpenFGA internally. So this is great for us. I think everyone who's here works at companies that are already into an adopters list. So thank you very much. But this is of course very important for the project. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you all. All right. What else do we have here? Roadmap. Andres will talk about this as well.
Oh yeah, so we mentioned we're working there is described as idempotent rights. Tyler, if you want, you can adjust the wording to be more precise, but this is the feature we've been discussing. We showed the last time that we had some dramatic improvements in list objects. Those are still under an experimental flag, and we are gonna remove the experimental flag hopefully soon. We saw around like a 5x improvements in P50, and P99 is, I think we saw 30%, but we have, those are in our own cloud. We have certain customers that have very nasty list object things, so P99 is skewed for those use cases, so probably you're gonna have better results. We are gonna be working, we are lagging in some SDK support for some features, in particular in .NET, and Ragged is gonna spend some cycles soon in improving those and releasing those. So that's also coming pretty soon. And then there's one there that is called Simplified Search with Permissions for Large Cardinality Relations. We've been sharing ideas for that one, which is this one about creating a flattened permission index, how we could do it. Right now, that is something that we are working, but still not clear for us if we will be able to open source something of that. We are using third-party tooling and products that have certain open source components, but we still don't know. So in the next few months, probably we are going to have more visibility into that, and I think we can ship that for everyone, a version of that at least for everyone. So that's where we are. And something else that's going on, and I think some of the companies here will also be in the loop, is we are working with the CNCF to get to the incubation stage. That takes time, but right now they are in the process of interviewing adopters, and I think I listed ReadAI and Grafana and in the list of companies they might want to interview. So you might get contacted or not. It depends, up to them, right? To learn more about your use case there. But yeah, we're very excited about that. Like, getting to incubation would be awesome for us. Cool. Oh, great. I didn't know that you were in the loop, Andrew. So how did it, I hope you talked very great things about OpenFGA.
Yeah, it went well. It went well.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And I'll ping offline. I want to also talk about some use cases you might have and learn how you're solving those. So I'll ping you offline about that. Okay, yeah. And this is usual stuff, right? So help us spread the word, help us getting more stars, share your work, and everything you share about how using OpenFGA is very valuable. Something that we are discussing with Carla start doing. Can I share that, Carla, or not yet?
Yeah, you can share.
Okay. Yes, as part of these meetings, have at some moment like a Carla, do a short 10-minute interview with someone using
Yeah.
OpenFGA, right? And to understand how they're using it and the challenges they have to get a better understanding for us and for the community of the different solutions and customers and companies using FGA.
Yeah, the thing is, I already had a few calls with some of you, and in those calls, I probably learned more in 30 minutes than I have in I'm not going to say how much time, but I think it would be very useful for the community as well to learn how everyone else is actually using the product in production. So yeah, let us know what you think about that.
Perfect. Okay. I think that's pretty much it.
Just enjoy the community as well, please. Follow us
Good.
everywhere.
Any questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much for being here, and see each other in a month.
Bye.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.